Klein? And we said, yes, we knew Walter and Janet Klein. And did you know Mildred Bulk? Yes, we knew Mildred Bulk. And the list went on, and we had these mutual friends. And lo and behold, here we are out on the east end of Long Island meeting again in Southold. And then came the time for a new members class somewhere not long after, and who is in the new members class but Bob and Helen. And I walked in the room and I said, I thought you were already members. You're everything like new members. You're contributing, you're worshiping, you're singing in the choir. Well, we just decided this was the time to finally join. So they did. And Helen was in the choir. I have fond memories of choir parties on Willis Creek Drive and being regaled with stories of their recent trip, most notably and enviously walking somewhere in Scotland or Europe, and Bob opening a Bass Ale for me and one for himself, and sharing their memories of their experiences together. This bookshelf is usually behind the table for anybody sitting in that bench leading worship. Bob made that bookshelf. If you, he probably would not want me to share that because he was very humble about his contributions. But if you walk through that room, you'll also see an end table. That's one of two that he made and gave to the church as well. Always sharing. And so, as I said, he was a steady and wise presence, always and everywhere around the congregation. And he was still on the personnel committee in 2007 when he was among those who were encouraging us to buy a house somewhere. And when we did, he nearly jumped out of the chair and cheered for me. He said, yeah, good for you. Always very, very supportive. And so today marks a kind of threshold. A threshold that probably began when that nobody wants to hear. And baptism was going to be coming to its conclusion here on earth. And that threshold continued when the family gathered at the Memorial Garden a few weeks ago and opened up their niche. And today is another threshold as we reckon and embrace and marvel at the wonders of the grace of God, that we are in the presence of God's children, one of whom is Bob, a pillar not just of the church but of his family, one who, because there's a great grandchild in the room, even as we give thanks and grateful and continue to share what has been given in our stories, in our memories, in the invisible gifts of the grace of God that have been lavished upon a family and have not died and will never perish, but live on in light, because nothing is more important than that we keep track, you and I, of who we are, where we've been, these stories, the people that we've met along the way that make us grateful. It's through these stories and their particularities that God makes God's self known to each one of us, most powerfully, most personally. And if this is true, and I believe it is, to lose track of our stories is to be profoundly impoverished, not just as human beings, but spiritually. And so this 75-year marriage and all of its wonder and beauty and joy and miracle comes to its conclusion, and it sends our loss and our pain exploding with all of that grace and all of that love and all of that faith out into space. And it becomes our Polaris, becomes our Orion to look up to guide our way. Let that be our memory. Let that be our commitment from this day, from this place, to remember and give thanks and to celebrate. Robert William Keith, his journey is complete, and he is not alone, and neither are we. Thanks be to God. Amen. We come to our time of remembrances and thanksgivings, and as I mentioned, there will be some folks who have planned to share, and then you're free to come up as you feel led to either one of the microphones and share what you may like to share. Thank you.
Good morning. Have I got the mic right? I'm Helen and Bob's eldest, Melissa. It's hard to believe that Dad is not here with us. At 97 and a half, he was with me for 71 years. And not many people have that kind of good fortune. I loved him so much. He lived a long, healthy life, and I am forever grateful for that. Dad loved having a goal, and he set and realized hundreds over his lifetime. He became treasurer of his college fraternity to cover his college costs. He sought and earned high grades and graduated early with honors from college. He saved up $1,000 to be able to marry Mom. He had 3 piggy banks on his dresser when we were children, and each evening he put triplicates of the day's change into those banks to save equally for our college educations. He made to-do lists regularly on yellow legal pads and had worked his way through them systematically. He balanced his checking account statements when they arrived, accounting for every penny. Later, he set goals to find the best burger on the North Fork, the best ice cream on the North Fork, and he created walks and bike routes with the goal of building up to 20 miles a day to prepare for European hiking and biking trips. He found the best burger, he traveled broadly, and he sent 3 children and 3 grandchildren through college. He met his goals and surpassed most. Dad was a person who valued responsibility, honesty, and achievement. He loved his career in personnel, first at the Equitable Life Insurance Company, and then in each of the successive versions of the Hanover Bank, the Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company, the Chase Manhattan Bank, and J.P. Morgan Chase. He particularly enjoyed his early days in college recruiting, visiting campuses, and identifying potential employees for the bank's training programs. He admired and enjoyed his coworkers, and he worked hard to create equal opportunity employment policies, equity in hiring practices, merit opportunities, and appropriate retirement benefits. He often spoke of treating every coworker with dignity and respect, and he knew the names of colleagues and employees from the guards and cleaners all the way up to the chairman. He had a good word, an anecdote, or a joke for every encounter. As a parent, Dad was demanding, and he dedicated himself to raising 3 honest, responsible, and productive children. He had clear ideas about education, which he valued enormously. Every child should earn good grades and have an instrument and a sport. He had broad expectations around our behavior at the dinner table, our achievement in school, involvement in church and community, and earning money. At the dinner table, we rotated setting and clearing the table, saying grace, reporting on our day, and then we heard an anecdote from Dad, which usually ended with the moral, honesty is the best policy. Sometimes we had dinner table quizzes. The only one I remember was naming the 5 boroughs of New York City, which tripped me up regularly. And he planned educational vacations. We toured Civil War battlefields, walked the Freedom Trail in Boston, and sampled a plane, a train compartment, and a ferry boat. Later, Dad determined what he thought was the best course for each of us, and we toured colleges, universities, and maritime academies. He also hoped that we would each earn a graduate degree, and that came to pass as well. Dad did not sit still and did not let the grass grow under his feet. He and Mom finished the house they could not afford to have built completely, then constructed the hardscaping, finished the basement, 2 patios, landscaped and maintained a large yard, and later built a pool house. Saturdays were yard work days for all of us, and then on Sunday afternoon, Dad would do office work at his desk. Once the house and yard were established, Dad took up woodworking and made much of our furniture and an untold quantity of objects, including chessboards and men, wooden chests, small and large clock cases, salad servers, mortgage buttons, a cradle, a rocking horse, toy boats and planes, and much more. He worked in multiples and gifted his creations to almost everyone who knew him. And this continued through his years in Greenport when he began collecting and polishing beach rocks to share with others. He said he was never bored a day in his life. Dad always enjoyed a good story, a good saying, a good joke, and he had a well-stocked repertoire to draw upon. Everyone here has heard lots of each, I suspect, so I'll just mention a couple which I treasure. When something was great, it was the best thing since night baseball, or the best thing since sliced bread. When someone was problematic, they were tougher than a boiled owl. And a less than stellar outcome was better than a kick in the teeth. But in the end, thinking about Dad always means thinking about Mom. I've never known a couple more entwined than Mom and Dad. They were as one and gave each other meaning and support. Dad so often talked about how wonderful Mom is, how beautiful she is, and how lucky he was to have found her. He wanted to celebrate 75 years of marriage to the love of his life, Helen, and he met that goal too. I know that for both of them, meeting and falling in love was the place where life truly began, and being together was everything. They were so blessed in being able to build a life together, and they were dedicated to making life wonderful for one another. And their love will always be the most important thing about each of them. I am grateful that they met and had one another for more than 75 years of health and happiness. I know that Dad awaits Mom with open arms, wherever he may be. Thank you, Dad, for all that you have given us and for your wonderful life.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm Matthew Keith. I'm his son. About Robert Keith, my dad. He was my elephant through life. When a small child, my elephant was just plain big. I think that is that way for all children. Bigger than life and kind of in control of our herd. Our herd was 5. Herding us must not have been easy. I remember the lost art of car trips. Many car trips and vacation, in fact. Getting 3 children into the car, packing the trunk the first couple of hours, supposed to take 15 minutes. Then armed with the AAA strip maps that were highlighted in yellow, and reservations at motels 8 hours apart on the journey, for the whole journey. Off we went. 3 kids bored, and after only a few hours, let alone days, poking each other, fighting. Can't tell you how many times he threatened to stop the car. Probably did a few. Somehow he got herded through many of these vacations. My elephant somehow survived. Not sure how, and he did not give up. Later, I was in my own herd.
I heard of love and commitment and partnership. I saw and appreciated what he did and continued to support all his 3 herds of children for his whole life. I think our family always saw him as our elephant, whether a visit in the last years in Syosset, just with Jamie and I, just visiting him, the family visiting at holidays, later as a bigger family of 3 in Mattituck with Jamie and Will and me. And then at holidays, he was the head elephant, more loose and more relaxed, and the leader guide of 3 herds. He felt and acted on a desire to be helpful, involved, supportive to his whole family. He seemed to really find himself and filled out as a person during this time. I knew him less then than I should have. As our herd moved and grew, and I focused on that. Andrew probably knew him the best and spent extra time traveling with him. Still, he was my elephant, and I learned enough from him to become a better elephant myself. In the last 5 years, our elephant became someone we shared life more equally with. The transition was gradual, and it became clear that finally he needed to be herded by his children. We did that herding and returning the love and guidance our elephant gave to us. I'm thankful for my family that he left behind, the children that love each other and care. I need to say that his most important relationship through all these years was between Helen and he. She was his guide and along his principal partner. His support and love, his holy. Mom Elephant was always there, and together we were lucky to have them both and see a lifelong stability, something that we are truly blessed with. Others in his life probably see different sides of Bob the elephant. Not unlike the parable of the 3 blind people that touch different parts of the elephant, the trunk, the leg, the tail, and think they see the elephant in whole. Know that whatever part you touched, you only saw a piece of the elephant. I love my dad, the elephant. I miss him.
Hi, my name is Will, for those who don't know me. I'm one of the Keith's grandchildren, which gives me a particular perspective on my pop. And so it's limited, but it's focused on in his last 30 years. He passed away when I was 32, and Pop was truly a remarkable man. That's something we've heard from his pastor, from his children, and something that I think is particularly remarkable about him that I had the opportunity to notice as someone who just knew him in those last 30 years, is that he continued to grow and change and grow in his love and his patience and his kindness as he aged. I knew him in his 70s, his 80s, and his 90s, and he kept growing until the day that he passed. That takes a special man who is as successful as he was to commit himself to growing at the age of 80 when he discovered he loved computer solitaire and learned how to use electronics. I knew the best of him because of that growth in my life. And the best of Pop was pretty amazing. Pop was an incredibly devoted, loving husband. After more than 70 years of marriage, he would still sing the Miss America song when Helen walked in the room. I never saw his face light up so much as whenever he would hear me compliment Gigi, Helen. I'd say something nice about her, and his face would just light up. He'd be so happy. He just delighted in appreciating and caring for his wife. Something else that would light up his face is time with family, which is something he prioritized in the time that I knew him. And I think his whole life, it sounds like. I'm told that he built his house to be a grandchild trap, and he was successful. He celebrated his grandchildren's successes, his children's successes. His face would light up upon seeing us. It would light up upon hearing about a job or graduation. I don't think anything gave him more joy than other people's successes, something that his pastor mentioned earlier. The stories I've heard of him suggest that he worked about as hard as anybody can throughout the course of his career. And after decade after decade of hard work, instead of spending his labor on fancy cars or anything like that, he paid for his children and grandchildren to go through school. That's pretty amazing. That's changed the lives of everyone in this family dramatically. But not only was he loving and towards his family and experiencing that or demonstrating that joy in his interactions with us and that commitment to us that's shown in his use of money and time, he was also generous, remarkably generous in expanding his family. My wife, Megan, has told me she always felt like part of the family. She has grown to love Pop as much as anyone in her family, which is amazing in only a few years. I've heard the same thing from another grandchild, Lucy, who told me that her partner feels like she was accepted as one of the family immediately. And it takes a special person to open their arms to bring others into their tribe in that way. I once observed him to take the time to talk to his daughter-in-law's sister and pause and just share that he was proud of her for her career successes. And that love displayed towards her was moving. I could see how it touched her and changed her a little bit in that moment. And that's the kind of man Pop was. I can tell by how many people are here that you all were touched by his love and his care and his service. Something that I think he committed his life to, caring for others, serving, and loving others. It says so much that his greatest joys were always about other people. He was also a man that serves as a remarkable example of discipline and integrity. He would never leave for tomorrow a task that could be done today. And Melissa mentioned those lists. I visited him earlier this year, and on his desk was a list on a yellow notepad, and most of the things on there were crossed off. If he said he would do something, he did it. And I never heard him speak a negative word about anybody that he knew. He used his words to build people up. It's this combination of living himself to the highest standards, striving to reach the highest standards for himself, and offering a generous love to others that I look at as a picture of the God that I believe in. I'm a Christian, and I think that's a part of God's character that he was able to display for me as an example of living the best that he can and holding himself to the highest standards while offering generous love to others. I love Pop, and I miss him, and I'm so grateful for the example he set for me of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. He was an amazing man, and I'm so grateful for the example that I got to learn from.
I don't know if you can see me over the lectern. I'm Jamie. I am Bob and Helen's daughter-in-law. And just seeing everyone in the church today, it is so warming to really see people from all parts of Bob Keith's life who admire him and love him. And it's just so good for all of you to be here in community with the family. So thank you so much for being here. I have 3 sharings about Dad that I'd like to offer. The first is that Dad made life's transitions with grace and joy, which is really rare. Change is hard. But Dad really went from being a senior bank executive in Manhattan to retirement without any doubt about the meaning of his life. He celebrated in the great tie giveaway at the first Thanksgiving. He embarked on world travel, bicycle and walking trips in Europe with his Helen and his son Andy, and yearly extended visits to Andy in Hawaii. He went from family patriarch with tight control of plans and schedules, we were always at least 15 minutes early, to consummate grandfather, Pop to his grandchildren, Lucy, Calvin, and Will, ready or at least accepting of their joyful chaos. He was all in on a daily basis for flag raising and lowering and swims in Peconic Bay Creek with his grandchildren if possible. And he was an annual and enthusiastic night before Christmas storyteller and generous supporter of education, as you've all heard. The magnificent wood train set and Secrets Behind Doors toy that he made in his woodshop for Will is now going to be loved by his great-grandson, James, and we will make sure that James knows that Pop made them. Dad went from being a man of the 1940s and 50s who'd never touched a typewriter and didn't know where Helen kept the lettuce on the few luncheons when he really had to fend for himself, to a man you could find daily at his computer playing card games and doing work. And he actually became the family expert on loading the dishwasher, so we really needed to do it right. Dad went from a long period of advanced but vigorous and proud older age to a very blessedly short time of more limitations over the last year, which he accepted with gratitude and with humbleness. He appreciated so deeply every phone call and every visit and all the blessings and little things in life and family that are most important. Which brings me to the second sharing about Dad. Although work was very much consuming and he was deeply dedicated and accomplished, his family defined him. He welcomed me wholeheartedly into the Keith clan, although he did say I was the first Democrat to sit at his dining room table. And he created a safe and unselfish parental presence that I had never experienced before. And he helped me through every difficult twist of the road with a steady and dependable hand. Recently, I was looking at a letter he wrote to me about one of the worst years of my life, and he told me that he was on my side, and he really was, and I knew he was. He welcomed my dear sister Ruth into the extended family, and he always had time to help Matthew build a brick patio and retile a bathroom. He loved Thanksgivings and Christmases and Easters with all of us at home. He loved celebrating anniversaries with family trips. He loved golf and bridge with his Helen. And he displayed Melissa's artwork not only in his home, but prominently in his office at the bank. He loved battling Andy and Matthew on Christmas Eve, usually embarrassingly, to see who could sing Christmas carols loudest at church. He loved hearing his Helen, as her beautiful soprano voice soared in this church and in the church in Syosset in the choir every Sunday and most holidays. Which brings me to the third sharing and the most undeniable sharing about Dad. He loved his holy Helen. More than anything else on earth, he loved her and did not want to leave her. But I dare say that he was incredibly blessed to be the one doing the leaving. Helen and Bob met in college at Mizzou and married soon after Dad graduated. They grew together and were an unbeatable team in bridge, on the golf course, through travels and home improvements projects, hosting family and friends, and in every turn of life. And after 75 years of marriage, Dad was more in love with Mom than he ever was, and he still liked her too. He was always happiest in her company and a little lost without her. And a love like theirs is rare and lives forever, and I know will sustain his Helen forever too. Dad changed over the years of his life because he never stopped growing in life and in his relationships, which is really another rarity. And all whom he loved will carry him forward in our hearts and memories and on the influence that he's had on our lives.
My name is Michael, and I have the great good fortune to be part of this family because I met Melissa 41 years ago, and she felt I could meet his parents pretty quickly. I didn't grow up in the Keith household. My parents shared the same early years that they had. and it was kind of sobering for me to realize that. They lived through the wake of a world war, a depression, another world war, the 50s with its war, the 60s with its war, and on and on. And that world turmoil hardly is comparable to the joys and sorrows of the families living through them and the challenges. Out of that time and those lives, Robert Keith, one of the finest men I've ever known, and with his beloved Helen, a model of a marriage to be admired. I met the family 41 years ago, and in the first moments of sorting out names and greetings, Bob assured me that I could address him as Mr. Keith. In addition to his sly humor, he had a repertoire of very clean jokes appropriate to the situation. Most notable, however, to me was that it was clear that he lived his life with an integrity and honesty which benefited all with whom he did business and whom he served in his life. And he had a smile you loved to see. For the depth of goodness it revealed. I have a small stereotype here, but if one were a car salesman, Bob would be your ideal victim, because he lived as if his values of truth and honesty and honest dealing were to be expected of others. But if you ever needed to buy a car, Robert Keith was the man you would wish to be selling it. What a fine, fine, good man, and what a extraordinary, gracious, and wonderful family. I had the benefit of knowing Bob after he had been tempered by the life in those times and a professional career that could not be any better, but is also tempered by his expectations of his family and the glorious frustrations they showed when they went their own way, and he was able to accommodate their dreams alongside his wishes. My children love him as much as any grandchild could, and the folks who are not here and the folks here today are the true legacy of this fine, fine man. If anyone here would like to share a story or share anything about Bob, you're most welcome to come up at a microphone, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'm the youngest Andrew, and I have not prepared remarks because I'm pretty sure I could make it to it. I apologize.
What did he say? Here you are.
My husband, Arthur Tasker, who likewise is not with us any longer, what was I going to say? Admired Bob tremendously. He consulted with him. Arthur was a twin, the firstborn. He would therefore have an older brother. But he said to me once he thought of Bob as the older brother he never had.
Just a few words. Joyce and I met Bob and Helen just about 40 years ago when he first joined the Conservation Advisory Council, another one of his jobs that he worked for the town over many years. And during that time, we eventually met the family as we went along. And a constant Helen and Bob would walk Peconic Landing. We'd see them for dinner occasionally and all of that. But one of the comments that Joyce and I constantly made, and it's the highest compliment, I think, is that when we grow up, we want to be like Bob and Helen.
I get to pronounce a blessing, and that blessing is a blessing intended for all of the words that have just been shared. And what is behind those words? The love, the joy, the witness, the faith. Also for the silence. Equally sacred and blessed are the words that did not cross lips, but which quiver on the landscapes of hearts. A blessing upon it all. Amen. Please remain standing for the benediction. The Lord bless you and watch over you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look kindly on you and give you peace. Amen.